Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. This is the State Water Board's Water Rights Fee Stakeholder Meeting. My name is David Checkerway from the State Water Board Fee Branch. In the back there, if you haven't already gotten one, there are agendas, and there's also a sign-in sheet. Before we get started, we'll go ahead and go through a few of the housekeeping rules. In case of emergency, we're asked to exit the doors, go down the stairs, and go across the street to the park. Restrooms are outside the doors to the left, and there is a cafeteria downstairs. First floor, just follow the stairs down, and it's to the right. This meeting is being webcast, so if you have questions on the web, please go ahead and send them in, and we'll go ahead and answer them or respond to them accordingly. For those that are in the room, there is a mic that we passed around, so if you have questions, please go ahead and raise your hands and be patient with us, and we'll get you a mic, and that way those online can hear the questions. This is our third overall water rights fee stakeholder meeting. As we mentioned earlier, for those that were at our water quality meeting this morning, these meetings in line with the budget process. The first meeting was right after the July governor's proposed budget in January. Then we had another meeting in June after the May revised budget was released. And now we're meeting again for the enacted budget. John Weir to the right of me, also part of the fee branch. We'll kind of go into some of the brief discussions about the cost drivers and the fund condition. But at this point, there weren't really many changes or adjustments from the May revised budget. And basically, this meeting here is, we're kind of recapping a lot of our conversations that we had from June. In our June meeting, we basically went over some of our options for adjusting our fees. Basically, and we've kind of talked about this in our fund condition, we're needing about $3.9 million in total revenue in the water rights fund. This will basically get the program whole and drive us to about a 5% reserve. Traditionally we've been looking at about a 10% reserve, but this year staff's recommending that we don't do more increases or significantly more increases than what we need to do, and kind of minimize that by keeping about a 5% reserve. And John, John kind of go through this, but there's a couple of major kind of cost drivers. One, of course, is there was a BCP approved for AB 747, which is the Administrative Hearing Office. That's about a $1.7 million adjustment to the fund. There were also employee compensation and adjustments of nearly $1 million. So that's about $3 million of the $3.9 million that's needed. And in the past, and I mentioned this also at our board adoption last year in September, that we were looking and going into this year, starting off about a 3 to 6% fee increase. And that was basically because the fund, we've been using this fund reserve to cover our costs, and our revenue has been kind of short of our expenditures. So this is the year where we're trying to tie that up. And also I kind of want to mention this, and we've talked about this in prior meetings. This year, of course, has been a little tricky and a little difficult because we've been dealing with an accounting system, Fiscal, the state's accounting system. And we, at this point in the year, we would have, really good true numbers of what our expenditures are looking like for fiscal year 18-19 and what our revenue totals are. At this point, there's still some projections in place. We're doing a lot of manual processes because of Fiscal, and, we just don't have the reports that we've had in the past. And so that's why we're being a little conservative on our reserve and on our increases, basically, to try to get this program whole. So with that said, we've got Julie Rosardo here from the Division of Water Rights. I also have to the left of me John Russell, who's the Deputy Director of Division of Administrative Services. He's also up here. And we'll go through again. We'll go through again, some of the options that we've been discussing. Staff at this time has come up with, again, some preferred options that at this point that we're looking going forward and we're recommending taking to the board. Of course, things could change. Of course, we can get different directions by the September 17th board meeting. We also, there's also kind of a handful of also fee adjustments that we're looking at doing, petitions, the cannabis on-stream reservoirs, there's an application filing fee, and then there's also an underground storage streamlined permitting process. So there's also a few others that we'd like to kind of line up and clean up. Some of these, haven't been adjusted in several years, so of course we're trying to drive our fees with covering our staff cost. And what I will say, and those that have been participating in this meeting over the last, 3 or 4 years, we've made some adjustments to some of our fees. A lot of these fees weren't adjusted since fiscal year 03-04, since the beginning when this structure came into place. So, and it kind of caught up with us. It caught us up with the workload increasing. It caught up with staff costs increasing over the years. So, I think staff feels comfortable if these proposals go through that. For the most part, we're now at a point where revenue is covering our staff costs specifically for a lot of these activities that are in our fee schedule and the workload that staff has been working on. So with that said, I'll pass it off to John to just kind of briefly go over our cost drivers and kind of go over the fund condition and how it looks.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is John Weir. As David said, we showed you a lot of the proposals that we were considering with a few changes. With regards to the cost drivers, as we see here, really they're the same as what we saw back in the May revise. That is, there was no increase or change in funding or expenditures. The budget cost drivers are the same. Indeed, the administrative hearing office, which is the largest of that, is still at the 1.7. The control section remains the same. So really, our message here is that for the cost drivers, we're still playing with the same numbers that we showed you earlier back in June, and we're then based on the May revised. So as far as the fund condition itself, we mentioned there's a few changes. One in particular, and it's almost too minor to mention, I'll say it anyway. What we did find in the budget that was enacted was there was a slight decrease in the amount of expenditures for other state operations of about 4,000. It's mostly a rounding error. It doesn't change what we have to face or any of our decisions, but I did include it, and it is part of the fund condition that you see, which again is based on the 1920 enacted budget. Of course, it's, I think, important to reiterate, even though David touched upon it, that if we did nothing, we made no change in fees, we would be looking at an estimated $3.6 million budget deficit. And the proposals that we outlined back in June were designed to remedy that budget shortfall. All in all, about $4 million is needed to get us into that 5% range. The various options that we showed you, I won't go into detail, but it serves a purpose of pointing out that what we showed you in option 1, there we have a change in the per acre foot and no change in the base fee. That is, we keep the base fee at $225. If we did that, we would need to increase the per acre foot charge to 0.09. If you look at option 4, what we have there is an increase in the base fee of $75, which takes it to $225 to $300. And if we were to put that proposal, we would be looking at an increase in the per acre foot of only 0.085. And it is because of a number of reasons that staff is recommending that we pursue and go with option 4 when we present to the board in September. The reason for this, namely, is the fact that, as we will go a little more detail, that the staff time in processing, renewing applications, there's over 14,000, is spread across the entire program. If we didn't increase the base fee, we don't believe that that would be equitable. And to give you an example, and we did include this in the narrative, if you look at the entire number of water rights holders, 37% of them don't pay anything more than the base fee. So any increase we would put forth in a per acre foot wouldn't touch 37% of them. We dug a little deeper into those numbers, and as it turns out, we can actually go as high as 60% of the water rights holders are only paying a couple dollars more than the base fee. If you go up to like 75% of them are paying less than $15 more than the base fee. So we have a large number of these people who are only paying at or just a little above that base fee. And it was one of the primary reasons we were looking at going with option 4. Again, we feel it's more equitable. It is also the option that was preferred by those of you who have responded to our invitation to give us feedback, that being that it would lessen the impact on the large payers. So, you know, as far as what we will do in that, as we recommend this, oh, yes, you have a question?
Hi, Bob Gore on behalf of MID, Kings River, Kern County, City of Fresno, wine grape growers, et cetera. We did agree to this option. It is more equitable in our opinion, coupled with, which is what I wanted to add, an annual review of the petition fees. We don't want to get into this decadal thing again in the way of, to use your term, equity. We need to have from staff a commitment to stay on top of the petitions in the future. Thanks.
Danny Merkley, California Farm Bureau. Option 4 seems to be the most impactful for our members. They're some of the smallest diverters and the ones that can least afford that. So you're looking at it from an equitable standpoint across everybody. It's just the opposite for us. It's inequitable, whatever the word is.
I understand, yes.
Because it does put a much bigger burden on those that are diverting such small amounts, and they can least afford these kinds of increases. Last year we looked at a $75, what was it, 50%, I think, increase. And this year we're looking at another 75, which is, as you say, 33%. Those are pretty significant.
Yeah, this is Chuck White with Manette Phelps and Phillips representing IID. I think we're in line with what Bob Gore said, is that we believe that the option 4, as you're suggesting, is the most equitable. We think that if you were to do a detailed review of the time spent on water rights holders, ranging from the small users to the large users, we believe, although we haven't seen the numbers, that you'd find that the per acre foot cost is much higher for small water users than for large water users. And so while we're willing to agree to option 4 as the best one on the table this year, we've also suggested to you that this next year, if you could take some time to evaluate the level of expenditures per acre foot by tier, and I don't know what that tier would be off the top of my head, but go from small water users to large water users and the amount of staff time that is expended. And I would be quite surprised if we would find that it would actually, you still haven't addressed the full inequitability of the fee structure that you're proposing here, because we believe, by and large, that most of your staff time is spent on proportionally on smaller water users than larger water users. And I don't have the numbers to back that up, but I hope you will by the time we come around this next year to look at this question.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Adam Robin, Northern California Water Association. Building on Mr. White's comments there, I think that analysis would be really helpful moving forward about how staff time and resources are allocated among the different classes or sizes, I guess, or tiers or whatever of water rights holders. I think there is precedent in other board fee schedules. For example, the public water system operating fees are assessed on a per connection basis with de-escalating fees as system size increases. It's not perfect, but it's sort of a rough proxy for the fact that as system size increases, an hour of staff time goes a lot further. So, and I think, our guiding principles here that we want the fees to reflect basically where staff time and resources are being spent. And it can never be perfect, but ways that we can get more refined is something that we're certainly interested in pursuing. Thanks.
Any other questions at this point? Any questions online? So another proposal that we're looking at doing, and Jeff, if you'd like to come up, we'll discuss the FERC program, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And is anyone right now representing PG&E in the audience? I don't see anyone. Okay. So the FERC fee hasn't been adjusted in, I believe it's been about 7 years since we've adjusted the FERC fees, and we did an analysis, and we're basically short. I believe it's about 400 and up here. Yeah, almost $500,000 with our revenue with expenditures, and the FERC program is one of these continually evolving programs, because you get people that come in under the license and then they get a license and they move over to another side of the house. And we currently have 2 structures in place. And, Jeff will go into a little bit of the details of kind of what program's been working on. But based on this analysis and the revenue that we need really about $650,000 in additional revenue for the FERC program to cover their costs. And then what we refer to as the revenue goes towards the entire water rights fund to kind of cover their the portion of the reserve in the water rights fund. So we've been talking over the last, again, year now about different options to generate that revenue. And I'll have, again, Jeff go ahead and discuss those options here.
Okay, thank you. Like you said, my name is Jeff Wetzel, and I'm involved with the water quality certifications for the hydroelectric projects as they get tied up with FERC. And we did develop 3 options, and all 3 options accomplish our goals financially. Option 1 keeps the same existing current fee structure that we have of a base fee and then a price per kilowatt for the hydroelectric project as it goes when it begins relicensing or undergoing relicensing, and then drops down as we issue our certification for the project and as FERC issues their license, and it goes into what we call implementation or post-licensing. So option 1 keeps that same fee structure and just raises the cost per kilowatt accordingly. Option 2 is a slight little tweak, but keeps basically that you have a cost for relicensing and then another cost for post-licensing. But what we did there is raise the base fee up to $5,000 to get at some of the smaller hydroelectric projects that are small in kilowatt but are complex and controversial and take a lot of staff time. Then lastly, our third option, which is the preferred option that we're headed in the direction right now, is getting away from thinking of a project in the relicensing terms and then post-licensing terms, and just having one fee structure with a base fee and then a price per kilowatt for how large the project generates. And we see that the workload for staff doesn't really fall within the undergoing or the relicensing necessarily. It's basically at what phase of the project. So we see at certain phases in post-licensing a large workload for staff, just as large as relicensing. So we thought the best path forward here, pending some good feedback, is to just have one fee for these hydroelectric projects.
Any questions regarding the FERC proposal? Anything online? Okay, thank you, Joe. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, again, the revenue that we're looking at collecting, when I talk about this $3.9 million of revenue, a bulk of it, of course, the bulk of it, of course, is coming from the permits, the license, and the pending applications, and then another slice of that revenue is coming from the FERC. We have another 4 proposals here for these next options, and yes, it's going to generate revenue. It may take some time because, of course, some of these programs, one are in existence, or of course the cannabis one is new. So we've kind of anticipated what it would look like in the fund condition, but you know, in about a year and a half, we'll have better revenue figures to figure out what these options did to kind of help cover the cost, and then also kind of help lower our fees on some of our other fee payers. So the next one, I believe it's Sam, right? The water rights petition fee proposals. So Sam will go ahead and give a discussion on this proposal.
Hi, my name is Sam Bolenbryan. I am the new manager of the petitions, licenses, and registration section. And I'm going to be going over 2 different items on the agenda today. One is changes to our fees for the petitions, and I have 5 proposals there. And then on the other item, it's related to cannabis, and I'll get into that in a minute. But just kind of stepping through these 5 options, they're going to be on the slides behind me, and they're also in the handout. I do want to kind of comment on Mr. Gore's comment that we haven't made changes to these fees in a very long time since the fee schedule started. And I think that's the main kind of take-home point here, is that a lot of the petitions fees have not changed since 2004, and so there's a bit of catch-up that's required. And I definitely agree that we should not have this be a decadal process of catch-up, and in the future we will be looking at these on an annual basis. And kind of what we're looking at today is a step in that direction to kind of take a closer look at these fees. And so there's a couple different types of petitions. The first one I'm going to talk about is for a change petition, where you're making a change to your permit or license, or potentially to what you've proposed in your application. And so there's 2 different types of fees to consider for these change petitions. One is an annual fee. And so each year, folks are subject to an annual fee currently of $1,000. And what we're proposing is to, in addition to that fee of $1,000, add on a volumetric charge of 40 cents per acre foot. And this fee would not apply to everyone. And so it only applies under certain circumstances, mainly that you've made the change that you're requesting prior to the approval, and that you're not kind of following through diligently on the processing of the petition. So there's a lot of information the State Water Board needs to approve that change, and there's a bit of back and forth. And if the board is kind of waiting for information, like completing a California Environmental Quality Act document, this fee will apply. However, it is worth noting that also as part of this change in the annual fee, there will be a temporary exemption from the fee, and it will be lowered to $500 per year without a volumetric rate if the petitioner is showing due diligence, essentially, in pursuing the approval process. And you're essentially waiting for the board and our staff resources to be available to work on the petition. So that's the first change, and I think I might try and run through all of them, but feel free to interrupt me if you have questions on a specific one, or I can take questions at the end. The next change is a change to the initial filing of that change petition. And so the current fee is $1,000 plus 30 cents per acre foot after the first 10 acre feet on the right. And so what we're proposing to change is an additional 10 cents per acre foot, as well as increasing the maximum cap. And so this maximum cap won't affect everyone, but the 10-cent increase per acre foot will, if you are changing a water right, and that water right is for greater than 10 acre feet. So that's the proposal up on the screen behind me. And so this is just a one-time fee when you submit the change petition. Moving on to the next type of petition we process. It's called a time extension. And so as most of you I'm sure are familiar, but in case you're not, the water rights, kind of issuance of a new water right involves a couple of steps. The first is the application, where you file for a new water right. The State Water Board processes that, approves it, and issues a permit. And what that permit contains is a requirement to build out the project, develop what you propose to develop, and then come back to the State Water Board after a defined period of time to show that you actually did need that volume of water and that you put that water to beneficial use. And so there's this permitting period. And then once you've kind of shown that you needed the water, you've put it to use, the State Water Board goes through a licensing process and it issues you a permanent license for that water rights. In certain cases, people need more time to fully build out their project or to put the water to beneficial use, and so they will file for a time extension. And so this is a petition that gets filed with my program asking for more time to essentially implement the project. And so the current fee is a flat fee of $1,000 just to file this, and this is as the fee has been for almost 15 years. And what we're proposing is to match the fee structure with the change petitions, where there would be a volumetric charge of 40 cents per acre foot for similar to all other change petitions. An important note is often people file multiple petitions at the same time. So if you have a project where you're filing a change petition and a time extension, there will be a 50% discount on the time extension because there's some economies there where we can process the petitions together as one project. And the other point worth noting is that the cap, again, will match the regular change petition process and be a maximum fee of $20,000. Moving on to the next change. I'm giving kind of an overview of different water rights processes, so forgive me if you already know. But there are certain cases where a wastewater treatment plant wants to reduce the discharge to a river from that wastewater treatment plant and kind of put that water to a different use or use that water in a different area. And so that requires a petition from the Division of Water Rights. And we evaluate what that change in discharge will do to other senior water rights in the environment. It's a current flat fee of $1,000, and these analyses can be fairly complex. And it's kind of a strange thing to think about. We're reducing a discharge rather than increasing a diversion, but similar kind of concepts in the analysis. And what we're proposing is a base fee of $5,000 plus $3 per acre foot, up to a maximum of $75,000. Worth noting that looking back at our old wastewater change petitions, I don't know if we're going to hit that cap very often. While these projects are very complex, they're for widely varying amounts of water, particularly in kind of supply-constrained areas of the state where every acre foot matters. These are big, expensive projects often for smaller amounts of water, but they are very complex. And so that's why this base fee is a little higher, or this volumetric fee is a little higher. Then the last change in this list of 5 is for our temporary urgency changes or temporary changes. So these are cases where the approval is for 180 days or less. There's some urgent reason that the water right needs to be adjusted, say a new purpose of use added where it's for irrigation traditionally, but we need to use it for a drinking water supply during a drought. Like the water right holder can request a temporary urgency change or TUCP. The fees for that are $2,000 as a base fee and 30 cents. And what we're proposing to do is increase that volumetric fee to 50 cents per acre foot. The maximum fee would stay the same. This is the same fee that also applies to temporary transfers, where folks need to adjust their water rights in order to facilitate providing the water from one person to another. And so these temporary transfers would be subject to this fee as well. And so that is a long litany of changes and incremental increases needed to kind of reconcile a lack of change over the last 15 years that we are catching up on now.
Hi. Going forward, we'd like to see a bit more detail, as Chuck referred to metrics. Fair enough. So some of the fees are going up by 75x. Explaining the staff time involved, why there's staff involved, giving some evidence of due diligence, i.e. you've decided to use existing resources instead of piling yet another new staff member on board, or hiring someone at say a grade 4 instead of a grade 1. Because water is going to be more precious and more highly regulated, some attention is going to be paid where perhaps actions were taken for granted in the future. So for 2021, we'll need to talk a lot more detail. You guys, thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions? I think I can move on to the other item I'm covering in a slightly different arena. The reason I'm also covering this is, in addition to petitions, I also oversee the registrations program. And the main activity there is the cannabis registrations. It's called a small irrigation and use registration. And so the change we are proposing here is for a specific subset of SIURs. And this is for folks that have an on-stream reservoir. Up until very recently, on-stream reservoirs were not allowed under the cannabis policy that dictates the requirements of these cannabis SIURs. Recently, a change was made to allow these on-stream reservoirs subject to certain additional conditions and review processes. And so what this change in the fee schedule is reflecting is the allowance of these, the new allowance of these on-stream reservoirs. And so what you're seeing on the screen is our normal fee for cannabis SIURs is $750 as an initial filing, and then an annual fee of $750. The proposed change is that if the cannabis SIUR includes an on-stream reservoir, that there is an additional $4,000 initial fee, as well as a $250 annual fee. Increase in the annual fee. And so what that results in is a total initial fee of $4,750, and then an annual fee of $1,000. The other component of the proposed change is this recognition that certain cannabis cultivators also irrigate for other purposes. And so what we're also proposing is if a cannabis cultivator is also applying for a regular small irrigation and use registration for irrigation of other types of crops, that would be an additional filing. And so these would come in together, most likely, to the State Water Board. And what we're proposing there is a discount of 50% on the non-cannabis SIUR. And this is because the registrations will likely be processed together as one project, and there will be some efficiencies there. The normal fee for a non-cannabis SIUR is $750 for the initial filing, and then a $100 renewal fee. And so that's why you're seeing these proposed changes for a specific subset where they're holding a cannabis SIUR and a non-cannabis SIUR. The non-cannabis SIUR would be $375 for the initial filing, and then $50 for the renewal fee. Are there any questions on that proposal?
Thanks, Adam, Robin, Nakwa. This is a question less about the specifics of this, of attachment 5, than more sort of how the cannabis cultivation regulation expenditures and revenues are detailed or broken out in attachment 2, the Water Rights Fund condition overview. So the cannabis, I'm looking at page 1 of 2 of attachment 2 here, second to last line, cannabis cultivation regulation. Under revenue, is that, I guess, what's collected from the current SIUR fee schedule, or is that, I guess, what makes that up?
So exactly. So for 18-19, I think we're projecting like $500,000. So that's our revenue coming from our current SIUR, so the $750 fee. We bumped that up to like $925,000 based on a couple of factors. One, some additional SIURs that are coming in, but also this new fee that's being proposed. We anticipate getting anywhere from about another $400,000 or so. So that would be somewhat of our universe. It's going to take some time for these to come in, but we did bump our revenue up based on this fee proposal. Okay. And the reason, one of the reasons is because when prior to it becoming into the policy, there were stakeholders out there that were asking for this requirement, and so it was put into the policy. And in part of the policy, of course, we needed to add a fee for that workload. So we do anticipate more enrollees coming in, but they'd be paying, of course, a higher fee than that $750.
That's the on-stream SIUR fee? Okay.
Correct.
So the four, I mean, obviously you're not going to know until the checks come in, but the expectation is that that $400,000 is going to be made up, it sounds like, largely through that on-site additional fee, but also you're just getting more of these things because people are starting to pay the fees if they didn't previously, or they're starting to grow cannabis, or whatever it is.
Right. I mean, it's slowly. I mean, of course, it's nowhere near what we anticipated enrollments, but we're starting to see a little bit of ramp up.
Thank you. Thanks.
Questions online? Okay.
All right, thank you.
We'll move on to items number 6 and number 7.
Good afternoon. I am Matt McCarthy, and I work on water rights permitting for the State Water Board. I'm here today to discuss agenda items 6 and 7, which both involve certain changes to filing and annual fees for water right permit applications. Agenda item 6 refers to proposed changes to the portion of a filing fee that is non-refundable, and agenda item 7 refers to proposed changes to filing and annual fees for standard permit applications that are submitted as part of a special process that is currently under development. For agenda item 6, please refer to attachment 6 of today's agenda. The proposed non-refundable fee adjustment was presented during the June 11th fee stakeholder meeting and has not been changed. This item refers to raising the non-refundable portion of the initial application filing fee from $250 to $500 as a base fee, plus 10% of the actual application filing fee. This change would apply to all 5 types of permit applications. The fee schedule language will also provide more detail regarding the initial review period for an application where the non-refundable portion of the filing fee would be applicable. Staff will recommend the adoption of the proposed increases in the non-refundable portion of the fee. Are there any questions on item 6?
Do you want to go over just a couple of issues that we've seen, though, in the past because of the workload involved and when someone applies and then we're refunding the money back?
Sure, yes. Part of the reason for the change was that for all types of applications, regardless of the size, we only retain $250. And similar to many of the other fees, that had not changed in many years. So I think in our budget process, we at sometimes would have to refund a large amount of money back to reflect that refundable portion of the filing fee.
Does that include small livestock ponds?
No, those are just applications. Yes. And the fee also reflects that in this case, the smaller applications tend to be simpler than the larger applications. And so the fee retention reflects that, especially when it comes to reviewing it initially when you have situations with fully appropriated stream systems and you have large applicants that are attempting to file applications. Okay, so we'll switch to item 7. For agenda item 7, please refer to attachment 7 of today's agenda, which has 2 pages. The proposed reduction in fees for certain standard permit applications was presented during the June 11th fee stakeholder meeting and has not been changed. This item refers to proposed changes to filing and annual fees for standard permit applications that are submitted as part of a proposed streamlined process to appropriate high flows for diversions to underground storage. The proposed streamlined process would be focused primarily on the water availability analysis aspect of standard permit application processing. Applicants for standard permits would be required to pay a smaller fee if they meet certain criteria and elect to opt in to the process. If the application is approved and a permit is issued, refer to page 2 of the attachment 7, the permit and potential future license would be subject to smaller annual fees depending on the amount of water diverted. The proposed streamlined process is still under development, and I cannot provide any updates at this time. Staff will recommend adopting the fee changes as listed in option 2. Are there any questions on item 7?
And just to be clear, of course, there are 2 different filings, right? There's a standard application filing, and then there's the annual rights fee permitting license based on the part of actual diversions. There's 2 options there, right? And where staff is proposing option 2 on both the standard application and both the annual water rights fee.
Correct. It's for item 6, it's not proposed as an option 2, just a current status and a change. But for item 7, it's proposed as option 1, which is the current status, and then option 2 would be the change. But with that keeping in mind that this system is not in place yet. As I mentioned, this process for streamlined processing of these applications hasn't been adopted yet.
So when will it be adopted? At the 17th meeting? Or is it still being furnished and calibrated? And
Yeah, I don't have an update. We're definitely working diligently on it.
Working
So,
diligently.
and as Amanda Montgomery had mentioned in previous meetings, the fee structure process is actually ahead of the process itself. We're just trying to make sure that we have it in place so that we can enact the fee process if and when the actual streamlined process is in place. The reduced fee is meant as an incentive to participate in that streamlined process.
Sort of obit or dicta, the opt-in thing is a lot of value, but that's another story. The last meeting, Eric Ekdahl, made some mention of a future announcement about groundwater storage definitions or water rights revisions in the late summer. Do we have something soon that's going to put us back in our chairs? I can't be more specific because he wasn't. Do we have a policy or guidance coming out soon?
Hi, this is Sam Wallenbrine again. One of the things that Eric mentioned was a fact sheet clarifying purposes of use relating to some questions around whether beneficial use and recharge and how those related. That fact sheet is out and available on our website, and a number of kind of your constituents and stakeholders have said that's been helpful. The other thing we're working on is it's not adopting something, but it's just adjusting how the projects are prioritized and how they're processed, and that's what the streamlining is. And the hope is to have that out with the board package for the fees. And so, however, it's worth noting that that proposal and this fee reduction, there aren't a lot of interdependencies. It's either, does it make sense to have a discount in the fee schedule for folks that are not diverting the full face value of their right every year? These high flows are going to be infrequent, so it makes sense to have some type of discount unless the right is actually put to use that year. So that's kind of the proposal, discount or no discount.
Danny Merkley again, California Farm Bureau. At the risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record, the terminology that's used I think continues to be a little confusing. Groundwater storage versus groundwater recharge, and even though in spite of some of the definitions and whatnot, when I see groundwater storage, I think of groundwater banking. And they're very different, and they're dealt with differently by the water board, and sure like to see some more consistent terminology and understanding of the difference between the two.
A place to start would be that fact sheet, but we're happy to kind of walk through it in more detail too, if you want to. I mean, yeah, synchronizing the fact sheet and the fee proposal is certainly something we can do.
At this point, are there any questions online? No? Any other questions here regarding any of the fee proposals?
Julie Rosardo, Division of Water Rights. So I would just like to make kind of a wrap-up comment here. Please do submit any written comments that you have as a result of the things that we've talked about today. I did hear some ideas about potentially a structure such as used with public water system fees and how those are structured and tiered. That would be very interesting to us to get some examples there and have your feedback. As well as I heard some thoughts about looking at our annual performance metrics, or kind of looking at our petitions in particular and in an annual manner. So those kinds of things we really would appreciate some written feedback. And then for folks who aren't in the room but are online, same thing. We would really appreciate your written feedback if you haven't already given it.
Yeah, I'd like to make just a couple of general comments. I appreciate the effort in trying to equalize fees amongst various levels of users, and also the review of the individual programs, make sure each program is paying its fair share. I'm listed on here as probably the 5th largest water right fee payer according to the list here. In general, the program since 2011, once it was fully funded locally, when it lost its general fund support, we've seen about a 75% increase in fees during that time frame. That's about 5 to 7% a year. Consumer price index is 1 to 2% per year. The rates we're seeing on this continual increase, and I'm leaving out the administrative law office in this discussion right now. That rate of increase is higher than anything else I'm seeing in our annual budgets. This year alone, we're going to see around a $50,000 to $60,000 increase. I think it's $62,000 increase in fees from what's proposed. That's enough to pay for half an employee for me. And that's the view that our growers, my board takes a look at on those rates. And I'm getting pressured as to why is it going up at such an increased rate. So anything we can do to look at cost containment, efficiencies, is really helpful and really appreciated. And the more information we can have to have an honest discussion is really helpful and greatly appreciated. So look forward to more detail in this coming year. Thanks.
And I do agree. I think it's always helpful when we we have these group settings, but again, have more individual conversations about it, about these issues, about the increased costs and things like that. Would be more than welcome to set up individual meetings. So some of our next steps at this point, of course, as I mentioned earlier, that this proposal, along with the water quality and our drinking water fee proposals, will be going to the board on September 17th. And 10 days prior to that, staff will be issuing and releasing a staff report that details these adjustments, gives an opportunity, of course, for the public to go ahead and comment through that process. So again, I would expect that a proposal will be coming out somewhere between this, September 7th, September 6th of the upcoming month, so about a month away. Staff is, kind of ramping up and in the process of briefing the board members on the issues. We've actually been doing this for the last few months, so we continue these conversations regarding the fees. And again, as Julie mentioned, if you have comments, prior to even the release of the stakeholder report, please let us know. And issues that we'd like to, of course, raise to our board members. So that's it for now. If there's, any other further discussion, we're around to help answer any questions. And again, please, if you need any additional information or like to talk with us personally, please reach out to us. Thank you.